Ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure it is to welcome you to another episode of the Spiritual Psychiatrist Podcast. Today we have a very, very, very special guest. She's a filmmaker and really, really caught my attention for a very, very important time in humanity's history. She made what I deem to be probably one of the most important films, period, ever created in humanity's history. Obviously, that's my perspective. And it's called Code 12. And so Melissa Tittl is here with us, the creator of this amazing film, investigative journalist, filmmaker, Hathor Studios. And, you got to be a brave one to do all of that and to release this message. So I'm really excited to delve into the secrets of the universe found in the Eternal Life Code 12. And so please welcome to the show, Melissa. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited to talk about this.
It's a joy to have you. And let's dive right in. Okay, so I believe that every step everybody has taken in this life has kind of like prepared them for what's to come. And so it's quite intriguing to me that you were chosen to create this film. And, like I said, what I deem to be the most important film currently on all of anything. So
Wow.
would love to just kind of hear
I'm so honored.
I'm like very sincere when I say that, because it's the eternal life code. The universe is mathematical. And this film, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's well done. So Melissa, I would love to know just kind of a little bit more about who is Melissa Tittl in this lifetime, some of the highlights of your hero's journey, and what kind of paved the way for you to be chosen to create this epic film.
Wow, that's a lot. I loved how you framed it in this lifetime, because isn't that the truth? We've lived so many lives, and then we have this one version that we're talking to at this moment in time. So in this lifetime, I've been a producer, writer, investigative journalist. I've worked for every major network. And when I exalted that in Hollywood, I took a job as head of content for Gaia, which is a streaming platform, does a lot of conscious programming, a lot of weird stuff if you're into that. And I did that for 5 years, and I decided to leave all of it behind. Not that I don't play nice with others or networks or any of that kind of stuff, but more that I wanted to build something on my own. I wanted to be able to say something that I felt none of these organizations wanted me to say. And that was Code 12 for me. So I started a production company called Hathor Studios. That kind of freed me from all of that corporate consciousness, if you will. And it's in the mainstream space. It's everywhere. It's constantly bombarding us with information. And I wanted to create something outside of that bubble, something that would kind of push the way that they tell us stories. And Code 12 was something that I had been thinking about since I was a kid. I mean, even in the film, I talk about how I had this reoccurring image in my mind over and over again as part of a dream. But I remember being a kid and thinking, this can't be what I have to look forward to as an adult. I mean, it seems like a lot of suffering. I mean, everyone's like, yeah, when you grow up, you're going to be able to do stuff. I'm like, am I going to be able to do stuff? I don't know. It's weird. So I always felt there was something beyond what we're given all the time. And we all have different restrictions. We're all born into completely different situations, and we all have different restrictions and different gifts given to us. It's like a game, right? Can you survive this incarnation with these amount of tools and these amount of limitations? And I thought about all that stuff when I was a teenager, and here we are now. So my journey has been always to find a way to communicate with people and a platform. And I remember thinking this, you're bringing something up at me. when I was in Hollywood, I was really unhappy with working in reality TV and, some of the stuff. It's the same crap. It wasn't motivating to me. And I remember thinking, I'm not ready to talk about what I know. I have to learn more. I have to learn the current system. I can't break the system unless I learn the system from the inside out. And that is what I dedicated most of my life to. And when I was ready, I'm like, okay, I learned it. I learned the system. I know how it works. Now I'm going to make something that's totally different.
And you did. And so before we dive into that, just honoring your hero's journey. And, I know to be true that time is simultaneous. And so I noticed that you named your studio Hathor Studios, which, has probably some significance as well. And when I said in this lifetime, that resonated as well. So before we dive into code 12, as a little girl, you had reoccurring dreams. I remember watching that. You talked about that. Can you kind of weave in, if you would, simultaneous time, perhaps Egypt, ancient Egypt, perhaps Hathor, perhaps the little child, and then we can use that as a segue. And by the way, kudos, because like every hero in their journey has that time where they delve into the system, and then they have to decide and have the courage to leave the system and to venture on their own, and that's a huge leap. So you did that, and you created something really spectacular. So can you walk us through simultaneous time, Hathor Studios, the recurring dream that you had as a little girl, and how that set us up for Code 12?
So I started having this dream around 10 years old. It was really prolific. It felt like I could taste the sand in my mouth. It was like one of those dreams, right? Where it's just really bright colors, and so it felt real. And so this is a reoccurring dream that happened until I was in my 20s. And it was the same thing. I'd be in a desert, a specific desert, and have a staff in my hand, and I'd walk to a certain part of that desert, completely desolate, nothing. There's nothing. There's no people. There's no rocks or one palm tree, just desert. And I would put that staff into the ground, and when I would hit the ground, it would ripple out into all these concentric circles, and then it all about 12 points would light up around the concentric circles, and then the dream would end. And that happened over and over and over again. And I don't know why it stopped in my 20s, but it stopped. But I kept seeing those images in my work. I kept seeing all of that. I wrote the first 5 seasons of Ancient Aliens. Like, I remember, covering different stuff, and it was the same symbols, concentric circles, and I don't, anyway, I calculated all this stuff in my head. I just kept it back there. And when it comes to simultaneously time, if you will, like as you said it, I think that there are points in our life where the veil is thin for each of us. Now, this is a term that's used all the time now. Like, the veil is thin, and now we're interacting with more beings, or we feel more stuff because the veil is thin. But I feel at points in each of our lives, the veil is thin for us. And for some reason, during that time period, I felt the veil was thin, and there was a bunch of time periods merging together that I was witnessing or feeling. And I think that's what my experience was, whether it was a past life or it was something in the future or whatever. But whatever it was communicating with me. We all have our obsessions with things, and I think this is where reincarnation is a real thing. Because why does your soul have an infinity to anything? When you're born into this world and you don't have experience with something, you don't even have exposure to it, and you like it, you know it. Like, where does that come from? That's an innate, no, it's like you've done it before. When I was younger, I used to write hieroglyphs, which I didn't really know what they were, but I used to write what looked like hieroglyphs on my wall, and my mom would be like, "We don't know what that is, so we're just going to scrub that off." So where does that come from? And that brings me back to Egypt. I think we all have had some kind of lifetime in Egypt. This is why it's such a spiritual journey. That's why there's so many tours. That's why people want to go there. They want to look, they want to touch the Great Pyramid, because in some way it's in our soul. It's there. And I'm no different. I had that same kind of obsession. And I went to Egypt. I've been to Egypt several times, but this specific journey, I knew I did not go to the Temple of Hathor when I went the first time, and I knew I had to go. I felt compelled. I felt like drawn to that temple. And I was on a film scout with Graham Hancock and his wife, and they're lovely. And we were with an Egyptologist. And this guy had just written a book on Dendera. He spent, well, I don't know, 3 years going through every single symbol in every room, and he's the guy, right? So we go there, we look at it. It's magnificent. It's beautiful. We go upstairs. There's a higher level where there's a zodiac on the ceiling. And this is what Graham wants to focus on in this episode. And, we look at it for a while. And then I say to them, hey, I kind of just want to spend, some time alone walking around by myself. And they're like, yeah, sure. We kind of did the film scout for Dendera, Hathor's temple. So if you've ever been to the Temple of Dendera, there's the Great Hall when you walk in, and then there's the Holy of Holies in the middle, and then around the Holy of Holies is 13 rooms. And then below the 13 rooms is a crypt, and then above that is like a higher level, which is where the Zodiac is. So I'm just walking around the Holy of Holies, meandering into any of these rooms. Now remember, there's no artifacts in the room. There's just hieroglyphs. And I don't know what they say. I mean, I know what a couple symbols mean, but other than that, I can't really translate it. I go into a specific room and I felt compelled to put my hands on a certain part of the wall in a specific, like this. And then I put my forehead between my hands on the wall. And at that moment in time, I felt every single emotion come through my body. It was so intense. I felt love, hate, joy, sadness, guilt, regret, like everything through my body. It was insane. It was every single emotion. I'm imagining every single frequency that dictates what humanity is. And I pull my head off of the wall, and I'm just like, my hands are like this, and I'm just staring at the wall. Like, what is that? And the Egyptologist comes around and he's like, where have you been? And I said, oh, I just was, walking around, and I came into this room. I thought I'd been gone 10 minutes. They couldn't find me for 2 hours. I was missing for 2 hours. Couldn't find me. And the temple isn't that big. I mean, it's big, but it's not, you can't get lost there. I mean, in 2 hours, they would have found me. It's not a secret room or anything. But I experienced some kind of missing time, which was very strange. For 2 weeks after that experience, I had dreams that about the temple. It would bring me into the temple. My dream would bring me into the dream time would bring me into the temple, and it would focus on certain areas and certain symbols. And I would just stare at those symbols. And then the next morning I would draw them out. I would call the Egyptologist, and I'm like, the room looks like this, and these are the symbols. Do you know where that is? And he's like, yes, and it means this. And then it stopped. I lost my connection to whatever's there. But all I could think of, there was something in that temple. There's some connection. And all of Egypt is like this. Everybody has an experience in different places, but there's something in that temple that is not the doing, right? You go to the Great Pyramid, you meditate, like you're in a big sarcophagi, in the Serapeum. But here, it was the how. It was how the universe works. And that is what I feel is in that temple. And the rest of the devices, like the Great Pyramid, they're part of that ancient technology, but the how and the why is in Dendera. And that is why I called my studio Hathor Studios, because I wanted to bring in the how and the why. I think we know this much about the universe. I think it's time for humanity to know much more. And I feel that frequency is in the understanding of the Temple of Dendera, Hathor's temple.
Yeah, beautiful. So as I'm listening, what's coming to me is, okay, ancient Egypt, time is simultaneous. At the age of 10, you start having these dreams of a staff and spheres on spheres on spheres on circles, 12, 12. And the secrets of the universe you feel are somehow like you felt every emotion. And then you go into the Holy of Holies in Dendra, and there's 13. 12 is the universal code. 13 is the universal mother from which everything is birthed from. Ancient Egypt, you worked with ancient, producer and screenwriter for that show, Ancient Aliens, where they used to say that, civilization came from Egypt. But actually, in my ceremonies, people are seeing before Egypt, there was Atlantis. And sometimes in my ceremonies, people are actually they're literally in Egypt, beyond space or time, breaking parasitic contracts that happened that were not honored in that time period. And some of us were actually there, and we are still there, and time was happening simultaneously. And some of the codes that you might have left behind, perhaps, you're also picking up in this lifetime, and receiving the downloads, and the dream is simultaneous as well. So it's almost like Egypt holds something, a very mystical kind of place where a lot happened for humanity. And each person, including you, is going back now, retrieving them codes, and also kind of expanding that into a new kind of history, rewriting history, if you want to say. And you were shown in the Temple of Dendra how the universe, you want to say, works. And then you name your studios Hathor Studios. And then you go on to create a film called Code 12. Now, walk me through kind of the film, and just some of the, just kind of help us, the audience, understand what was going through your heart, your mind when you named the film Code 12, and some of the important pieces that we might need to understand the essence of this film.
Sure. So every journey starts off with a seed. And I guess mine was that dream, but more the seed was, here I was writing all these shows, and I was interviewing all these people, from biologists to quantum physicists to esoteric knowledge to Egyptologists, archaeologists, right? Like, I had the Rolodex. I talked to these people all the time. And it just hit me one day. So one of the things that I feel is the most important thing as an investigative journalist is not the truth. The truth is subjective. There's many truths. Even if I found this code, there could be another variation of that truth that exists in time and space, right? There's never one truth. We can't look for the one truth. We are of many truths. So I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, knowing that, what is the pattern? Because that is the one thing you can trust, is the pattern that exists within time and space as we know it, from all the people that have either channeled it or wrote about it or investigated it. What's the pattern? What's the one thing that kind of connects everything? And because I can't trust anything else. Everything else is just a piece of the puzzle. And the two things, not just one, but the two things that came up was the two things are the concentric circles are in every culture. They're in every writing. They're in every religious depiction. They're everywhere. They're sketched on rocks in ancient parts that we don't even know people that lived there. They exist. And everybody just thought, okay, well, concentric circles. I mean, that's the easy thing to draw. So they probably just put that there for that reason and, bypass it. The other thing was the number 12. The number 12 is in everything. You just name one little area of study, and you'll see that within that study, there'll be a significance around 12. and you have to look for it because it's not necessarily going to jump out at you. But that was the one thing that just kept coming up. Every religious text had a understanding around 12 specifically. Now, here's something that I always think is really interesting in religious texts. I mean, the Bible does this a lot, but there's other places in different religious texts from different parts of the world that do it too. I don't really understand why we have to know the measurements of a building. Does anybody know that? Why do I need to know the measurements of Solomon's temple? It's thousands of years later. I need to know what happened at Solomon's temple, and as spiritual text, why it's important for my spiritual upbringing. But why do I need to know the measurements? I think that a lot of the times when spiritual texts are explaining things, they are putting it into metaphors, because if you're able to see the pattern, then you will see what it is they're really talking about. But they morph it into story. And by the way, this is what the TV and film industry does. We morph all messages into story and emotional context so that we feel that it's about XYZ when it's really about, this over here. So those two things stood out to me. And those were the seeds that started this whole, like, this is what I have to say. I'm going to connect. I'm going to research this and see how they're connected. And of course that just opened up Pandora's box, because once I set out on that journey, I realized how they were connected and how it really put together a whole piece of our story, of something that all these really great ancient civilizations and their spiritual teachings left behind, was that there was something earlier, some kind of morphogenic field that existed, that operated within time and space completely different than the one that we have now. And the one that we have now does not operate on the basis of 12, whether it's quantum physics or your biology or astronomy or, all that kind of stuff. But we operate in, what I've discovered is in more of a base 10 system. And base 10 being how we calculate things. We've created a system, not just financially, but an easier system, like a binary code, like a ones and zeros, like a calculation, a different mathematical code that almost seems artificial compared to how the universe really propagates. Like everything from, if you're listening to this, you're probably in this space and you've meditated, or you've gone on a journey, or you've channeled stuff. But either way, you are aware that when you have thoughts and intentions, they can go out into the universe and become things, whether that's negative or positive. And if you don't know that, well, that's a different podcast. But for the sake of this podcast, but how that thought propagates and turns into other thoughts and materialistic things is through the calculation of 12. And how the universe propagates itself, how it multiplies itself is through a sacred shape of a dodecahedron. And this is stuff that, I could go on and on about with Nassim Haramehn's work. He's done a lot of work on this. If you don't know him, he's an experimental quantum physicist, and he's got some really cool things, but he really talks about this dodecahedron. And then, of course, you have a dodecahedron and an icosahedron that also propagate time and space and create a simulation of sorts. So anyway, so the documentary starts off as the seed and then takes us on this journey, connecting all the different studies, whether it's ancient civilizations, the calculations of a building, the discussions about Atlantis, the spiritual texts of all these ancient religions, and also ancient Egypt and quantum physics and biology. The fact that we're only coded to use 3 of our DNA sections when we have the ability to have 12. But these are things we don't talk about.
Yeah. And so thank you, because everything you're saying right now is for those people who might listen to some of the things I'm saying. Melissa has just verified I'm not the only one. She studied it, and she looked at all the ancient cultures, and she saw the pattern. She had dreams since the age of 10 there is a base 12 code. And when the Bible says God made man in his image, according to my perspective, and obviously Melissa said there's many different versions of truth, but my current perspective is that was a mathematical formulation, a base 12 eternal life code, which Melissa, through her investigative journalism, has seen that somehow that morphogenetic field, which she found in all of her studies, going through all the ancient spiritual texts, there's a 12 in concentric circles, right? And the morphogenetic field for humanity, as Melissa just touched upon, is using 2 to 3 stranded DNA, but it's actually the 4th, 5th, and 6th stranded DNA is the soul. The 7th, 8th, 9th stranded DNA is the oversoul. The 10th, 11th, 12th stranded DNA is the avatar inner Christ. And guess what? Here in Ibiza 3 days ago, I received notification, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, that the eternal life code has been reinstated for humanity. And I won't tell you how that happened, but it happened. And that's the message that I've received. And I just got back from a ceremony, by the way, was with some of Nassim's people up in Switzerland after the World Economic Forum. And so like all of these concentric times, simultaneous times, everything you're saying, I'm listening to multidimensionally and I'm hearing you. Just got done with a podcast. I just got done in one of the ceremonies. That's why I was late here on my way, was telling me I need to go to Egypt and lay in the sarcophagus, right? That I just got done doing a podcast with Robert Edward Grant last week, which he was talking about Napoleon, all these great men lied in that, and then they were changed, in which the Ark of the Covenant back in Egypt was hidden underneath the earth of Egypt, the Great Pyramid, and it was used as a teleportation to Sirius B and to Andromeda M31. And so a lot of what you're telling me right now is like just, from your, and it's beautiful for me because it's from your own investigative journalism that you found these things independent, and you're open and you're seeing this pattern, the morphogenetic field. And for those people who don't know, a morphogenetic field is like when a diabetic cuts off their leg, it's like the blueprint for matter. Look up Rupert Sheldrake. The blueprint that matter condenses on is the morphogenetic field, which means even though humanity might not have its 12-stranded DNA online right now, we have the morphogenetic field, which means we have the potential to re-embody that 12-stranded DNA. And the inner Christos reclamation mission is that you are the inner Christ. Look within to the intron potential DNA, the morphogenetic field of your 12-stranded DNA, which Melissa was literally finding this pattern across all different things, and he created a film about it. And then also the concentric circles. So just wanted to interject that it's music to my ears that what you're saying to me is like, because like it's like, oh, you studied it and you went and you found these patterns. So I want to just like go ahead and like please take us deeper into. So you found the concentric circles, you found the patterns, the 12 going through. You named your studio Hathor Studios. You had that reoccurring dream, and then walk us through the next steps.
So I started interviewing people to see, one thing I want to say is that there's so many really great researchers in this space, and everybody has a piece of the puzzle. And this is something I want to say in the world as my research, meaning I'm piling everybody together. But I really wanted to respect everybody's work individually and showcase that as their work, but me putting it together, because I think it's important. I think everybody, there's a lot of like, people talking smack about other people in this research space. And I just think everybody's got a piece of the puzzle, and I don't want anything to do with that. I'm prefacing this because I really interviewed a lot of people, and even when the final cut was down, to be honest with you, there's a lot of people in there, but there was a lot more at one point. So, but I really just wanted to honor, and it's important to honor people's work because it's part of the bigger puzzle. So one of my favorite people in the world, and if you haven't looked up her work, I really like it. She writes a lot about Stonehenge, Maria Wheatley, but she's really fascinating. And she writes a lot about Stonehenge because that's her Hathor temple, right? But what she discovers in UK and Ireland, and even places outside of that, it translates to a lot of the other temples. And so her knowledge is just as ancient as ancient Egypt, even though you're dealing with Stonehenge, because they don't really know how old some of the platforms of these structures are. So, think about it. At one point, instead of looking at ancient Egypt or some of the places in the Middle East as being the oldest in the world, every time you say that, they find another stone circle that's even older. So we
Yeah.
don't know what the existence time period of those platforms where things have been built on top of it really are. So, I interviewed her. One of the things that I can't physically see with my own eyes, but obviously we have lots of depictions of it, is Atlantis. Atlantis is a city built in concentric circles. And I thought to myself, okay, so concentric circles are everywhere. But there's concentric circles in Atlantis, and Atlantis is a mythical place. Could there be a connection with the concentric circles that are everywhere across the world, any time period, thousands of years ago, with Atlantis? And Maria came up with with a calculation that you'll have to watch the movie to get all the details. But basically, she comes up with a calculation based on Plato's measurements. Again, we're talking about a mythical story of Atlantis. We're talking about a mythical city that's about it. There's a lesson in the story. Plato tells this, like, if there's a lesson in the story, if you challenge God, he'll destroy you, right? Like they got too big, they had too much technology, and then Zeus came and destroyed the island of Atlantis. There's the message. But underneath the message, Plato gives a specific measurement to the diameter and the length and the width of this circular concentric city. Now tell me why we need to know that, unless something's encoded in it. Like, why, like in any story of Atlantis, why would we need to know how big the city of Atlantis is? Right? That's funny. Anyway, so she took that calculation. She was able to match that. I told her that I'm doing this thing on 12, and I don't know if it has any relation to some of the temples. And I know she does a lot of measurements, and she said, okay, well, let me take the calculation of the diameter of Atlantis and multiply it by 12. Came up with a number, wasn't really significant. She took that same number and multiplied it by 10, and it was the diameter of the Earth. Interesting. Now she went to Stonehenge, which is her study, because this is what she does. And she was that same measurement of the diameter of Atlantis was in Stonehenge for the diameter of Stonehenge. And multiply it by 10, and you also have the Earth's diameter. Like, that is really random. Like, either the builders of Stonehenge knew Plato and told him that, or the other way around, and he's like, let me incorporate that into my story about Atlantis. Or they somehow are also alluding to something bigger. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Now, you go into some of these other temples and you have some similar calculations. But in each of these temples is two codes. There's this kind of 10, we'll call it, for the sake of the conversation, base 10 and base 12. We have a base 10 calculation. So meaning somebody came in and calculated certain things to measure exactly this one calculation. And at the same time, we also have a base 12 calculation at most of these temples. It's the same thing at Stonehenge. We have this strange connection to Atlantis and this base 10 calculation. But then the outer ring of Stonehenge, if you are able to connect the stones, you have a 12-sided star. And Maria is a genius. She was able to calculate the 12-sided star within the Stonehenge mechanism. And each of those lines in that 12-sided dodecahedron star that make up Stonehenge have a note, meaning they have a frequency to them that's calculated. But over the top, in the middle of Stonehenge, right? In the middle of Stonehenge, is the sarsen stones, and the sarsen stones calculate to that Plato diameter of the earth. So at one point, the older stones hold this other code, and then in the middle, they hold this other code. So so her and I discussed that there's other temples that have the same kind of coding, as if somebody came and reprogrammed them.
Yeah.
And if they reprogram them, that means they were part of some greater technology, meaning some of these buildings, temples, pyramids, could be connecting to an ancient morphogenic field, an eternal one, and then were reprogrammed to tap into something artificial.
Yeah. So today, actually, the reason I was late for this, anyway, in the
Did you fall into a
ceremony,
portal? Is that what happened?
yeah,
You were late?
yeah, I'm in Ibiza, and yeah, right before this, just 3 hours ago, 2 hours ago, a dear brother's in ceremony, and he's literally saying we're recreating Atlantis, and he's showing these ancient sacred temples and how we have to recode them back to the eternal life code.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain things that he was saying, specific things that we have to do to recode them, and to, how can you say, almost like a Wi-Fi network that goes into Earth, into the ley lines of Earth, and recodes Mother Earth back into, if you want to call it, the Christ conscious, the true Christ consciousness potential, by recoding these sacred sites. And so, if I hear you correctly, you're saying that these sacred sites, although they have like a 10, when you times it by 10, it's the Earth's diameter. There's also some type of 12 code as well, and it's almost like they've been recoded. According to one perspective, 950 billion years ago, there was a collective that fell from 12 circles, 12 DNA strands, base 12 eternal life code, and the 11th Stargate, which is Reoccurring, England, Stonehenge. There was a group there that fell and cut themselves off from source, and they decided to create a new mathematical system, because if they cut themselves off from the source of all energy, they need to siphon energy to remain immortal. And so they cut, in the Kabbalah tree of life, you'll see 10 circles, but it used to be 12. And each circle is a DNA strand. It's a bandwidth of frequency. It's a dimension. It's a universal stargate. And Vellapuzi, Stonehenge, is 11, and Egypt is 4, and they're very intimately connected. And Jeshua's mission, which is time simultaneous, was actually part of, and King Arthur's mission was a continuation of that, was to somehow 11 and 4 to reconnect those as part of their mission. And so, with that being said, it sounds like as you were delving into this film, you're seeing that there was a 10 code and a 12 code, and somehow these sacred sites were somehow both coded with the potential for both, but like was, when you times the diameter of 10, and you were finding this through your investigative independent journaling. I'm hooked. Walk me through from there, as you're seeing, and you're working with Wheatley and Stonehenge, and you're noticing these trends, the math behind these sacred sites. Walk us through the contents of what happened after this.
Well, I drive around in my really fast car, which is super fun.
I remember that. Oh, yeah. I remember that part of the movie.
If you, I totally got shit about that from some of my TV people. They're like, we don't understand why you're driving around in a car and a motorcycle. And I'm like, everybody is going from point A to point B. I mean, Graham Hancock has a whole show on Netflix where he's driving around in a Jeep most of the time. So, I mean, I just have like a sexier vehicle.
Yeah, you kind of look like that video character. You were like, anyway, yeah, it worked. I was seeing the concept.
It
Yeah,
was fun.
yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna make it fun. I mean, I think what never gets captured in these documentaries, or most of them. I mean, the Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse is great, and production value is amazing. But a lot of times these documentaries, like these independent documentaries, like they're all about the stuff, like the information, which of course we're talking about. But I think what we don't capture enough is that it is fun and exciting and sort of dangerous to go on the journey to figure out who you are and how the universe works. And I kind of wanted to capture that. I don't have like a Marvel budget, but I think that's important. I think that, I don't know. Anyway, that's my 2 cents about driving around cars and motorcycles.
Yeah, what kind of car was that? It was like a sports car with a convertible, right? If I remember correctly.
No, it was a 1965 Mustang. I
Oh, it was a
really,
Mustang.
I love like that old car, and it was really cool. It was very hard to drive. If you've,
Yeah.
I think we're so spoiled with like power steering, and it's just like it's like a workout. I'm like, how do people
Yeah.
drive
Yeah.
in the 60s? You know?
No power steering.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool. So you're going from point A to point B, driving around the '65 Mustang,
yeah.
making it fun, which I think, yeah, there is something really cool and fun about that process for sure. Yeah, and then so you're noticing these ancient sacred sites, and that math is like somehow if you times it by 10, but there's also a coding for 12. Can you
Mhm.
walk us through kind of the development of the film from there and what you discovered?
Well, I mean, the concept is okay. So let's say this exists. It doesn't. Even the morphogenic field is still, as much as Rupert Sheldrake's work is amazing, but again, how I know it's formed through our consciousness, but there had to be a kickoff point, right? It's just like the universe starting, right? In the
Yeah.
beginning, there was the word, and the word was good. Alluding to a vibration, a sound was created, and light combined to create that scalar energy, then expanded and then created the universe. So before that, what was there? We don't know. We can only articulate. And so we really don't know how a morphogenic field starts. There's lots of research on it, and it's amazing. And if you haven't read about it, you just should. You should just dive into it because it's just absolutely fabulous. And there's so much scientific data about it. So we're not just coming up with an idea and a concept. So you have to think, okay, so we don't know how a morphogenic field exists between squirrels or humans. It just starts, and then we feed it with our consciousness. So the question would be, we don't know how that starts, but then if we have two different sets of fields that we can engage in, and one of them we're in, and one of them we necessarily have not had access to because we didn't have the knowledge of it, who created it? And we dive into that. And there are a lot of versions of the Emerald Tablets, and they are hard to read, but there is a consensus between all the different translations that Thoth says, he basically watched the fall of Atlantis, and he built the Great Pyramid. He built it as some kind of frequency device, and he built the New World. So it sounds like, he calls himself the architect of this new world. Now, we dive into this throughout the film, but this kind of plants the seed is if he did do this, then what was the point, right? And I think it's alluded to in the Emerald Tablets that the fall of Atlantis was a split in humanity, kind of a welcoming of a lower dimensional entities coming into the space and morphing the DNA or the human existence.
Yeah.
So his way of cutting off that was to cut us off from our universal knowledge, our universal connection, our eternal connection, and locking us in to this other field that, again, wouldn't let those lower dimensional beings in. So again, saving us, but yet cutting us out from our divinity, our eternal nature. And in doing so, it was for a good reason, but we all forgot where we came from because it's been so long. We've been trapped in this field, and then the consciousness just gets worse, right? You think of some of these ancient temples, and that they knew this stuff, but they could only access it in limited amounts because they were under this other field, right? This other, for the sake of the conversation, simulation, if you will, this kind of stuckness. But we have these, as you said, these great avatars like Jesus, Buddha, several other characters, Mary Magdalene, throughout time and space that have been able in a human body to access all those fields and kind of be the representation of what you can do within this dimension of time and space, this this situation that we're in, this morphogenic field, this simulation. So we get into that, and we discuss that, and then how our consciousness is kind of morphed into what it is now, where we have to try so hard to remember what we really are and what we're really connected to.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of riff off of that a little bit from my perspective, of what I hear, and then also what's coming through for me is, according to my studies, Toth was alive, and he's reincarnated many times as Hermes Trismegistus, and he actually stole the CDT plates 11 from the Emerald Covenant, and he wrote the Emerald Tablets from that, and he took credit. And there was a blank slate of human technology after Atlantis fell. There was a migration of the Ark of the Covenant from Atlantis to Egypt, and they blank slated human DNA. And that's when, if you want to call it Babel, scrambled the human celestial DNA. So it has been difficult for us to remember. And Toth has self-appointed himself, after he blank slated the human technology DNA, celestial DNA, as a creator god. And actually, he was not the creator god, but if we don't remember who we are, then we can, go by the history record books. The Book of Alexandria was destroyed. All of the eternal life records were destroyed. But in some of my ceremonies, every DNA strand that we accrete, there's a cellular memory that is actually restored with every DNA strand. And so people are having memories of Atlantis. There is a timeline where Atlantis still exists. There's, the galactic councils are showing up in certain ceremonies. And so every DNA strand. And so I feel like we're rewriting history and restoring the eternal life code. And I feel like this film is a huge, a beautiful kind of like multiple perspectives with all of the leaders. Every opinion is respected, and I love that you said that. There's multiple angles and truths, and you cover a lot of them in this film. Yeah, cool way, in a fun way. So, okay, so walk us through then. Okay, from there, Melissa. Anything else coming through in the film that is important for kind of us to know without giving everything away? And by the way, we're gonna link the film in the notes. It's on Amazon Prime, I believe.
It's on Amazon Prime, but you can also go to our site, Hathor Studio, and we have the movie there that you can buy, and then we also have behind the scenes stuff, and we've got like extended interviews. Of course, I can't put 2 hours of interview for each person in the documentary, but if you want to watch all that, you can watch it there. And then it also supports our studio too. So if you are like, I'm not giving Amazon my money, I'm okay with that. You can come to Hathor Studio, and you can watch it anywhere in the world. The problem with Amazon is that right now their licensing is only US and UK. So if you go to Hathor Studio, it says you can watch any part of the movie you want, and you can buy the movie. You can watch it many times.
Yeah. So check it out, Hathor Studio. I'm telling you guys, it's really important movie. For me, I was so overjoyed when I found out that this movie existed. Literally, I was like, "What? That's insane! I can't believe this movie exists." So yeah, okay, cool. Walk us through. Anything else coming through that as you were creating the film? You talked to us a little bit about Atlantis. You talked to us a little bit about Hermes and the potential losing the eternal life code potentially. And as you continue to delve deeper into the film, what else was coming through for you as you continue to investigate?
I felt, it was weird. It was like I would find something, I would discover something. We talked to Robert Grant a little bit about some of the stuff that he has. I talked to actual programmers who talk about, how if this is really a simulation, like how are you not dead yet? And I'm like, that was a really good question, because maybe in a way it wants us to know, and I don't know why. I haven't figured that out yet. But we also dive into a really cool interview that I really liked, and the guy in the movie, I rode a motorcycle. I met him in a remote location, and that is true. He was very difficult to get a hold of, and he did not trust me. And he doesn't want anybody in the government to get a hold of his technology. But he's a geneticist from Stanford who has been really studying how to activate your 12-strand DNA. And that was a really amazing interview. I did try his machine, by the way, just
I
not
have
in.
one.
You have one?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Okay, wait. So I hadn't finished the documentary. I'm a little bit of a purist. I hadn't finished the documentary yet. And I wanted to try the machine because, of course, I'm curious. And so the machine, I love Dr. Jerry, by the way. I think he's amazing. The machine, I'm hooked up to the machine, and I feel like I hit a wall. I literally hit a wall. Like my body, like my soul and my body, like hit a wall. Like something was pushing me. And I remember resisting. I was like, I'm not going through. I can't go through. I have to finish what I started with code 12, because if I go through, then I'm going to come at it from the view of being outside, and I need to be with everybody looking out, or looking from the bottom up, right? Instead of from the top down. And so then it became really painful because the machine
Hmm.
was activating my system to move out, and I was like resisting, and it was like but now the movie's done, so I got to hook up with Dr. Jerry again so I can fully fly out into space.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, you sat on the Rorschach scalar wave machine, and it was literally trying to push your consciousness to an upward view, so you could
Yeah,
like through a wall or something, so
I
that you
felt
could
I felt
look
like
down.
I
Yeah,
felt physically it was moving me. Obviously, I'm laying in the machine. I'm not
yeah.
like somewhere else, but I felt it physically. Like I was I
But
was
you
leaving.
refuse to go because you're like, I don't want to. I want to create it from this
I got to
angle.
create it from this point. I mean, it's already, if you're not in the space, it's already hard to understand. So I was like, I got to
Mhm.
create it from here. If I'm too far out in space, like
Yeah.
I won't be able to be grounded enough to
Mhm.
get it from the level of where people are at.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I have to try it again. But I was just fascinated by that research. I think he's spot on. Um, and then William Henry is also in the documentary. He really brings in, if there is any kind of other, he brings in the idea of the ancient technology. So obviously we're talking about Dr. Jerry and his modern day technology. The same with another guy named Don Estes, who talks about his technology and his research into sound specifically, and how your voice is coded, and the voices you hear are coded, in the system, in the simulation, and that kind of thing. Um, but William Henry really talks about what he's discovered, which is the Osiris device, which is something in the Temple of Abydos, um, which is the ancient device that he believes that Seti the First and Hathor or Isis or his female counterpart were using this machine to transcend space and time. So basically doing what we're talking about. And so that means that they were already in the system, right? Like they were in the system, but they knew how to get out of the system. And one of the points that he makes that we talk about with Nassim Harriman later is that part of the component of leaving the system is being able to embrace electromagnetic energy. So what is electromagnetic energy? So in the sake of, you can't see this hieroglyph unless you're watching the movie, but in the sake of understanding how this device worked, you have Seti the First, which is a pharaoh, and you have a goddess on the other side. So the hieroglyph is suggesting that without these two, you can't translate space and time, meaning electric male, magnetic female. Without the female component, the technology, no matter what it is, won't work. Right. So a lot of like Dr. Jerry, Don Estes, like this, they're understand that. So they're creating that scalar energy. They're really not only the sound and light, but they get the electromagnetic energy. They understand the properties. A lot of the things that we do today either have a divine masculine or divine feminine. They're not a combined, in the terms of what we're talking about as far as technology and quantum physics, they're not combining electromagnetic energy. They're not combining the alpha omega. They're separating it. And within that separation, nobody's getting off the ground. The both components have to exist within the technology of. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, okay, so I'd like to meditate and shoot off in space or try the machine. There's also a practice, and I'm sure you actually teach this or in ceremony, where you understand those parts of yourself. You become that torus field. You become that electromagnetic energy. You become both divine masculine and divine feminine together to be able to create intentions, to create anything. And that's also a lost knowledge of not understanding how you exist and how the universe exists.
Yeah, I love that. And so to piggyback off of that, to transcend space and time, there needs to be a combination of electric energy, which is another word for masculine, giving energy, right side of the body, as well as magnetic energy, which is more feminine, which is more receptive energy. And literally speaking, when the top spin of the Merkaba, which is, I believe, is electric, and the bottom spin of the Merkaba, which is magnetic, and they're rotating at a certain spin degree rate, electromagnetic frequency, literally, the Merkaba can be activated. Now, a Merkaba is source force in movement. So when the Bible depicts, Melissa said that, like all stories are depicted, Hollywood, whatever, maybe even biblical, are like almost metaphors told in stories. Elijah, when he left the planet on a chariot of fire, that's actually a Merkaba. So a Merkaba to transcend space and time, and every single circle on the Kabbalah, it's supposed to be 12, the universal code. Every line in between those circles is how a Merkaba moves between dimensions. 12 to 11 to 10 to 9 to 8 to 7 to 6 to 5 to 4. And if you look at the exact circles, that's how you need to activate a certain Merkaba spin to travel from Universal Stargate 3, 6, 9, 12, the secrets of the universe. And it's through this spin that Melissa's talking about, electromagnetic. And we are all male and female. And actually, the reason male and female were created was female is magnetic. If you want to say, we're both electromagnetic, all of us, and to balance the hero scam was male and female is within us is key. But male has a little electric advantage, female has a little magnetic attract. And the actual reason for sacred energy exchange, as Isis, Magdalene were high priestess of, was actually to raise, if you want to say, the energy, the life force energy, electromagnetic, male and female come together to become one with source so that you can activate each other to catalyze, if you want to say, transcend space and time at the moment of climax, and to, take your consciousness and catalyze embodiment of your higher self so that you can quote unquote ascend. And so all of these things that Melissa are saying for me is music to my ears, because she decided not to push her consciousness from, go through the Rasha and look at it from that kind of way up there. But she said, nope, I got to make this film from the angle of where and meet people where they're at, instead of going bonk above and then creating from there. And she did. And like everything she's finding through her investigative journalism for me is confirming what my personal experience has been, or my studies have been. And so, you talked to Nassim, you talked to Robert, you talked to William Henry, and William Henry has some show on Gaia about Jesus in Nashville, and talks about this rod and the staff, which, he was on to something at that time, which are Stargate activating tools. And so you talk to all these amazing people and you're getting all these perspectives. Now, walk us through kind of like the kind of the almost not the conclusion, but kind of where all these studies and interviews kind of led you at the end, near the end of the film. Like, what was kind of your kind of what you found through all of that and why you named the film Code 12.
All really great questions. All right, so there's a lot of stuff in between,
Yeah.
but the thing is, it's not it's not ending. There's just so much, and I, you just have to end the film at some point. I think without getting into what happens at the end, the big takeaway that I would love for people to relish in is that through working on this film, it activated more parts of me. The merging between spirituality and science are so important, not because we need to logically explain to people how things work. That is true. We do need to do that. However, the other side part is the understanding of the universe is a science. It is mathematical. It is structures of time and space. All of that is so important, mixed with the understanding of the spirituality on a new level. And I already knew that. However, that is it is as a continuation, because I feel like this is a beginning to unraveling in a way that we can communicate, okay, all right, so this could be true. What else could be true? And my goal for this film is to ignite that part of each person who watches it that has that piece of their truth that they need to get out, that they need to say, that's part of that universal understanding, and merging that spirituality and science. Because to me, this feels like, okay, we discovered a code. How do we translate it into our everyday lives? How do we access that? And one of the ideas is through, right? Just think of a dodecahedron, right?
Yeah.
You think of a dodecahedron. We have a graphic of this in the movie. And you think of, like, well, what's in the middle of the dodecahedron? Well, there's another point, right? So dodecahedron's 12 faces. Well, what's the middle? What's the middle point? If space is propagating itself through a dodecahedron, right? So you're going through the center, that point would be 13. And you're gonna have to watch the film, but we dive into the whole mystery of 13 and why it's been misconstrued, turned around into something evil, when it really is the way through 0 point energy, the way to the next dimension of time and space, that translation, if you will. So we get into all of that. Since the movie has ended, meaning I've ended the movie, and I hope I can keep it going with another extension of this project that I'm working on getting funding for. I found, after, of course, I was doing a presentation on it, and I wanted to not talk just about what was in the movie, but I wanted to bring up, maybe some other evidence of it. And it was so crazy. In 2003, a Pierre Lumiere, who is a quantum physicist in France, was able to discover, using NASA's new technology at the time, 2003. It was like ancient. It's like a million years ago. 2003. Using and I'm going to paraphrase what it is. So if anybody is an astrophysicist or in this field, I'm murdering it by any means, so I apologize. But he used a technology where they were bouncing light into the universe to see if it had a structure, right? And what they found, I'll just get to the point. What they found was, or what he concluded in a paper that he professionally wrote, was that we live in a what seems to be a finite system that is structured into a dodecahedron. These are the edges of space-time that they have able to figure out in 2003, that is shaped like a dodecahedron. And he said this was really important for space travel, because we're using the curvature of not space-time, but space-time within the system, meaning the only way that we could go out of the system is through, right? So he wrote this whole paper on the fact that we possibly could be living in a dodecahedron, right? Right now on Earth, we're living in some weird simulation that we can't even see but he's, he wrote this big paper that's like mind blowing. 2003. Have you ever heard of it? I didn't hear about it until I discovered it. Right? This is crazy. A lot of viruses also have this dodecahedron shape. Now you're thinking, okay, but viruses are bad. And I'm like, but viruses are, the argument with viruses is viruses came before bacteria. And viruses are so smart, they created bacteria so they could feed on it. Right? So you have, the reason I bring that up is that there's this idea, this shape that transcends all space and time. You're thinking like, why is she bringing up viruses? Well, nobody can really kill viruses. They just mutate. They're beyond our system. We come up with things to remedy them, but there is no other system for them until we get our system on the next level, which is our connection to our eternity. And this just keeps going. It just keeps going until our minds expand into the fact that we are in that eternity, and we can translate that space and time. So the more knowledge we have, the more it becomes a reality, the more that we can actually access all of those things, even our DNA, to and contribute that into the morphogenic field now until that completely evaporates, so that we're part of that eternal structure.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so, just as you were creating this film, obviously, from my understanding, the language of the 12-stranded DNA, the morphogenetic field, to activate that, as Melissa's talking about, to expand into eternity as we expand our knowledge, is, symbols, sound, and light. So I can almost imagine, as you were creating this film, listening to the sound of these experts in multiple perspectives, receiving the scalar waves from the Rasha frequency machine. In ancient Egypt, looking at these ancient hieroglyphs, which are also communicating with your DNA, picking up codes and activating morphogenetic portions. As you started remembering more and more, you're saying that you were expanding for just but through making this film, and then you found the code, that the dodecahedron, as you shine this light, and you saw as a little child 10 spheres on spheres on spheres. And from my understanding, that's how the universe was created, on spheres on spheres on spheres on spheres on spheres. And you're seeing this with 12 of them, the base 12 code, the eternal life code. And then, at that point, I'm really happy that you brought in the number 13, because from the 13, which has been, history has not been kind or not even acknowledged 13. And there's different ways, every kind of different perspectives of, they call it the 0 point, the void from which all creation occurs, the divine mother, the birthing sacred womb from which all creation is manifest, from whatever you want to call it, from the 13. And I love that you say this, it's continuous. It's continuous. And it's never ending. But the more we expand, the more we activate, the more we remember, and in respect, once again, to your hero's journey, for having the courage to leave behind, a regular paying income, a regular stable job, and say, you know what, I'm going to create my own thing. Right? You're going to create your own thing, and then going on this hero's journey to remember, reactivate, and share all of these amazing, beautiful findings and patterns that you have found in the creation of this film. So thank you, Melissa, for really, from the bottom of my heart and from humanity, thank you, because I feel like this work, for such a time as this, like I keep saying, it is so important for me personally, and I know for humanity. So Hathor Studios, I know you guys just, I don't know if it was you guys, but like released a movie with Dr. Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It hasn't hit a streamer yet. We're working on
Okay.
that. It's called Source. Speaking of eternity.
Source, it's within, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, it's within you.
Can you give a sneak preview? Or like a shout out, or
Yeah. Sneak preview. I was just thinking, like, maybe send you the trailer. You can play it or something.
Cool.
This is definitely my mission, right? So Code 12 is kind of connecting all the dots, but Source, Dr. Joe's work, but it really follows. It's Dr. Joe's work and what and about meditation and what how he teaches it.
Mhm.
But the real awesome part about this documentary is that this is the most in-depth meditation study that's ever been done.
Mhm.
They've never taken an alternative structure, whether it's a machine or it's acupuncture or meditation, and being able to actually calculate it and create like a pharmaceutical study around the meditation. Now, that doesn't mean there's a pharmaceutical study happening within the meditation stuff. What it means is they're able to control the amount of time with these people so that you get real results, right? What are they eating? When are they sleeping? When are they meditating? What are they doing? What's their heart rate? What's their microbiome? What's their blood like every day? Right? What's happening to their cells? So for the first time in history, we have data that shows what happens to each one of your cells, what proteins you grow, what happens to your RNA and your DNA when you meditate for just 7 days. And that has never been shown. Of course, we have brainwave studies that are interesting, and there's been lots of stuff done on that, but never to the point of what happens inside your body. What are you growing? What are you growing when you're thinking? It's just amazing.
Amazing. So real live data from Dr. Joe's work. Source, it's within Hathor Studios, coming to a streaming platform near you soon. Now, I wanted to kind of conclude by asking you kind of like a personal question for me personally. And
Ooh.
to you, it's not a personal question, but like my question to you is, you're an investigative journalist. Storytelling, the art of storytelling, I feel like is Jesus spoke in parables, and this is like it automatically connects the heart and the mind. You're saying that all of Hollywood takes these metaphors, and can you give us some? What have you learned about? Because this is what we're gonna leave behind for our children. This is what we're gonna leave behind for
Yeah.
humanity. It's the stories, the songs, the videos of the that we have to share. Talk to us a little bit about storytelling, Melissa. What you've learned along the way, and just kind of any thoughts on tips on storytelling.
Oh, I love that. Um, we as humans like to hear things a certain way, whether we know it or not, whether we want to go against the grain. The art of storytelling has been, since the first human has been the thing. Before there was TVs, there was a fire, and everybody sat around it, and somebody who was really good at telling stories told a story, and that person started out in the same way that Hollywood or myself tells a story, right? You start the beginning out with an issue, a problem, right? I was in the woods and I was alone and I heard a noise, right? Beginning, right? That's fireside chat. We hear
Mhm.
this is exactly how we start a story out. And
Yeah,
so,
that's how you
and
started, right there.
yeah, exactly, just like that. And then there's a horn that blows.
Yeah.
Um, and then so the story starts out with an impetus for the journey, right? Just like the hero's journey. The hero's journey is exactly how you tell stories. You
Mhm.
start somewhere, you must go. It's a calling, it's a problem, and then from there you make a decision, and then you make another decision, and then there's a way to constantly tell the story that's been told for a long time. Now, the difference between when you are in the residence of something that is allowing your brain and your mind and your heart to open is different than storytelling that creates a level of fear. Now, you still have the same arousal. When you create all these new connections in your brain, the synapses are firing and you're learning something, or you're like connecting with something, that's the same kind of arousal that's happening when you're watching a scary movie or you're watching, Indiana Jones jump off a cliff while the guy's ripping his heart out, right? You're like, oh my God, right? Same arousal.
Mm.
So the thing is that the stories are the same. The format of telling the story is the same. The only thing that's different is the information.
Mm.
So it's not that scripted is bad. It's just that what's the character's, I can't believe I'm saying this, but what's the character's frequency? They
Mm.
want to win. They want to save their girlfriend. They want to go do something. Okay, that's their motivation, but what's the frequency? And that is depicted by the filmmaker. The frequency of the film is depicted by the filmmaker. And so if you go and you watch different kinds of for instance, you could do, you've probably watched these movies already, but if you were ever to think about them, like think about your experience watching Inception and then watching Indiana Jones. I'm just thinking about Indiana Jones. Then watching a horror movie, and then watching an emotional, movie. That's so loud. Can you hear that?
Yeah, it's part of the story. Yeah.
It's very intense.
Yeah.
And if you pay attention, you realize it's the same impetus. It's the same hero's journey, except there's a vibration of the characters that you're supposed to get, right? You're watching an emotional tale about somebody having I don't watch these movies, but the whole drama about a woman that hates her mother and has to take care of her, right? I don't spend an hour and a half watching a movie like that, but they're beautiful movies because the actors are great. But what's the vibration, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that's different is the vibration. And that's the only difference. Otherwise, stories have the same structure. We humans can't have a different structure.
Yeah.
There's a couple things, like for instance in Source, I had TV and People say, well, I don't really know, like it's a lot about Dr. Joe. And I'm like, but it's not, because he's not even the protagonist. The protagonist is the scientist who thought it was all bullshit. And at the end, he's like, I don't understand. All this data is so crazy, right? Without giving away the whole movie, it's just that everybody has an attraction to one thing that they want to forward along the way. But I'm telling you, every story is the same. It's just the vibration and the frequency filmmaker that creates that level of connection with you or your thoughts subconsciously.
I love that. Yeah. And so like that like literally, helps me see storytelling in a completely different way, because it's really about the frequency of the character, right? And the storytelling, the structure of all of it. And that's what we're going to leave behind. And that is the secrets of the universe, is energy, frequency, and vibration. And so that will actually give me a little leeway to, continue to be the world's craziest psychiatrist.
There you go.
Melissa, I just wanted to kind of end with, humanity's in such a, interesting time, and you're a storyteller, and you're telling some really amazing stories. If you had a message for humanity and kind of a vision for humanity, whatever it is that you're seeing, a message for humanity that comes from you, from your life experience, from all that your experience in Hollywood, from all your experience in now working with Dr. Joe, and all your experience, creating Code 12, and it's kind of understanding where we are at in humanity's history and where we would like to go. Do you have a kind of a vision that is formulating for you, that you would like to share with the audience?
I like to say, my message has always been that we already know. We already know. We already know what the answer is. We already know what the solution is. There's nothing really to figure out. The only thing to figure out is that you know it. Is to stop pretending you don't know it. And that's my mission, is to, whatever that is in each person, is to ignite that into what they're supposed to be. If we all can be what we came here to be, and we weren't living in fear, I think the vision, like there's this idea that we all live in a utopia, but that feels so far away from us because we haven't championed fear. And fear, living without fear, living in a place where you feel safe. Like you feel safe. You feel safe in this conversation. You feel safe walking out the door. You just feel safe around all humans, not the environment or something scary in the woods or some entity or paranormal activity. But our fear is really other humans and how they think of us and what we are. And that's that field. That's that consciousness, that separation. And the only time I have ever felt this is, okay, I did the same thing. I finished the Source documentary. I finally went to a retreat with Dr. Joe because I refused to go to a whole retreat when I was doing it because I was like, if I'm not objective, then I'm going to see it from a place of like, being in it, right? So I waited, I did the whole retreat. Day 4, the first 3 days, I was like, this is really long. I can't believe I'm sitting this long. And, it's a lot of meditation. Even me, I'm in this. Day 4, it hit me. Like I was like in it. I like went there. And I remember feeling this feeling. And everyone says it's love, And it's not like you need to know everybody there. And yes, people are friendly, but there's 2,000 people in a conference room. They're not really doing anything. But for the first time, it wasn't love I felt. I felt safe. And I thought, I don't really live that unsafe of a life. I mean, there's lots of people living really unsafe lives and in a bad place, but I do not. And I feel that unsafe, which means we have a lot of work to do on this planet. And if there's anything that needs to be done, it's like, how do we create a world where we do not have to fear our neighbor, where we can feel safe? Because when we are there, amazing things happen. It's not about changing policies or getting information or, we're going to do this or that. It is only about that, because once that happens, all of those things that make no sense because they're against humanity really will go away because they don't exist, because there's no reason to have them if we are safe. And that is my vision for the future, and how we get there is a work in progress, but that's my vision. I hope it happens.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. And I'm adding some intention, waking up one day where each and every human being feels safe, safe to be, safe to create, safe to play, safe to, be themselves. And safety is the prerequisite. So adding intention to that. Melissa, thank you so much for your hero's journey.
Thank you.
Thank you for creating so many important films and doing it in a fun way for humanity at this time. Source It's Within, coming to a streaming platform near you. Proof of meditation, literally scientific proof. It's going to reach the masses. Why? Because science and spirituality is merging into one. It is one and the same. And Melissa's at the forefront, creating these epic films. Hathor Studios, check it out. We're going to link all the links below in the show notes. So watch Code 12 if you can. Yeah, what a joy to have you on the show, Melissa. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
we'll end it with this. It's a joy. Congrats. You're it. Source. It's within you. You already know. It's already done. Love wins. Love, light, peace, and truth to all sentient beings. Till next time, peace.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa.